to later learn.
Jeremy, we're just going to jump in here because Michael Chong is speaking. Michael Chong is a Conservative MP from Ontario who says he was targeted by Chinese interference attempts. We now know that, yes, there were interference attempts, but it didn't affect the outcomes of the federal elections recently. Let's listen in.
She concluded that interference occurred in the last 2 general elections. And while this interference did not have an impact on which party came to power, it could have had an impact on the results at the riding level. And she concluded that it impacted the broader electoral system, that it undermined public confidence in Canadian democracy, and that it disproportionately targeted and negatively affected diaspora communities, particularly the Chinese community. Commissioner Hogue specifically concluded, with respect to Mr. Dong's nomination in Don Valley North, that the suspicion that Beijing interfered in Mr. Dong's nomination was well-grounded, and that this is significant because it could have determined the candidate who was elected to Parliament. She also concluded that Mr. Trudeau told her that he did not veto Mr. Dong's nomination because it would have direct electoral consequences, because the Liberal Party was expected to win Don Valley North, and she questioned why the Prime Minister did not take action as he said he was going to do after the election. With respect to Mr. Chu's election in Steveston, Richmond East, she concluded that there were strong indications of the PRC's involvement and that there is a reasonable possibility that the narratives could have impacted the results in this riding. And so this report is a damning set of conclusions and findings in the first phase of this inquiry about what the Trudeau government has indicated over the last 18 months and contradicts much of what the government has told us over that period of time. We look forward to her continuing her work in the second phase of this inquiry. And now I'll pass along the podium to my Francophone colleague.
Merci beaucoup, Michael. Les conclusions de la juge Hogg.
All right, so we're following this live news conference. We're listening to Michael Chong just a moment ago, now one of his French colleagues from Quebec who will do the same thing but in French. Michael Chong is a Conservative MP from Ontario. He has been quite outspoken in recent months, and that the Chinese tried to target him, members of his family, because he has been very outspoken about China's terrible human rights record, and that as a result of that, the Chinese went after him. Now, all of this is coming on the day that an interference inquiry releasing a report looking into the whole issue. How safe are Canadian elections? How safe is our democracy? The report with a couple of takeaways. One, that yes, there was interference, and China was the main perpetrator of that. No, it didn't affect the results of those 2 elections. But it did perhaps have an impact on 2 ridings that we know of, one of them in British Columbia. You're hearing about it, Steveston and Richmond East. And the other riding is in Ontario and in the Greater Toronto area. Now, in the case of British Columbia, a Conservative MP was defeated in 2021. There are indications that the results there may have been skewed by the Chinese. In the end, a Liberal was elected in that riding in 2021. And as for the riding in Ontario, there again, a Liberal did win the election as well. So Michael Chong is now also accusing the Trudeau government, and so are the Conservatives, saying the Trudeau government should have, could have, but didn't do more when it came to this issue of foreign interference, that they were asleep at the wheel, effectively, that there were warning signs, red flags had been sent up, and they didn't do enough. Another finding by the inquiry, by the way, this is disturbing. They say one of the big problems here, one of the big issues, is that Canadians' trust in our democratic system has now been eroded as a result of these stories. In other words, people don't necessarily have as much confidence as they did before in the federal election process. All right, we're expecting Michael Chong to maybe take some questions. Let's just see how this plays out here.
Well, I'll answer in English first, and then my colleague can answer in French for all of you. Mr. Trudeau indicated that this did not affect the election results at the riding level, and Justice Hogue concluded that while it's impossible to prove this because we have a secret ballot in Canada, that it did impact, in her language, the broader electoral system. It undermined public confidence, disproportionately targeted diaspora communities, and that one could reasonably conclude that it could have had an impact at the riding level. That's very different than what the Prime Minister had been indicating to us over the last 18 months. In addition, when it came to the intelligence that the government was provided with respect to the nomination in Don Valley North, where the intelligence indicated that the PRC was coercing international students into voting under threat to having their visas revoked and their families targeted back home, and corruptly interfering in that nomination by providing through proxy agents fraudulent addresses. The Prime Minister indicated that the intelligence, in his view, was not actionable. The Justice Hogue, however, concluded that the suspicion that the PRC interfered in that nomination was well grounded, and that it is significant because it could have impacted which candidate, which individual was elected in Don Valley North. So those are just two examples of the stark contrast between not only Mr. Johnson's report of last year, but what the government has been telling Canadians in Parliament over the last 18 months.
The Commissioner's report. That's not a big contradiction, though.
Je pense que le
Answer?
Premier ministre a été très clair en
I
disant
think that
que
the Prime
l'ingérence
Minister was
étrangère
very
avait pas
clear
été
in
sur
saying that foreign
le
interference
généraux
had
des
no
élections, ni sur
impact on the
aucune,
general elections,
circonscription.
nor on
Et,
any
la
riding.
juge Hogue a conclu aujourd'hui
Justice
qu'elle
Hogue
avait,
concluded
des
today
raisons de croire bien
that there
fondées
was
qu'effectivement
well-founded
l'ingérence
reason to
étrangère
believe
avait
that
pu
foreign
jouer un rôle,
interference could have played
dans
a
l'élection,
role in the
dans la
election
circonscription de M. Kenny Chiu.
in
Elle
Mr.
dit
Kenny
qu'elle ne
Chiu's
peut pas
riding.
confirmer hors de tout
And
doute
she
parce
said
que le
that
vote est
she could
secret,
not
on en est bien
confirm
conscient, mais
without
elle
a
dit qu'il est
doubt
possible
because,
que l'ingérence étrangère
as we
ait
know,
pu
ballots
avoir un
are
résultat différent
secret,
dans cette
but the election
circonscription-là.
could have
Je
had a
peux toujours
different
donner,
result in that
La
riding.
deuxième chose,
The
c'est
second thing
concernant Don Valley North. Le
is
Premier
about
ministre
Don Valley
a
North.
toujours mis en doute
The
l'information
Prime
à
Minister
l'effet,
always
qu'il y avait eu une
cast out
ingérence
on the
étrangère
information
provenant
that
de
there
la
was
République populaire de Chine
interference from
qui a
the
pu
People's Republic
influencer
of
le choix
China
du
that
candidat
may
libéral
have
pour cette circonscription.
affected
Et,
the choice
la
of
juge Hogue
the
aujourd'hui a
candidate
dit
for
qu'il y avait
that
des
riding.
informations plutôt
Today,
bien
the
fondées
Justice
qui ont
Hogue said that
démontré
there
qu'il
was
y a eu effectivement
well-founded
une
information
action qui
showing
a fait en
that there
sorte que
was,
des
in
étudiants,
fact,
ont pu être même
disinformation
forcés d'aller
and an
voter pour un
action
certain
that
candidat.
students may
Et
have even
pourquoi
been
on estime
forced
que
to
ça peut
vote for a
avoir des
certain
effets sur
candidate
le
and how
résultat
that
d'une
may have
élection, c'est
affected
que le
the results of
résultat
an
du
election.
choix d'une nomination dans
And
une
when it comes to the
circonscription
choice
que
of
le
a
gouvernement s'attendait de
nomination
gagner,
in a riding that the
l'ingérence
government
étrangère a fait
is
en sorte
going
de
to
choisir
win,
le candidat
then
qui a
foreign
finalement été élu.
interference would
Donc, c'est
choose
une
the
deuxième
candidate who would end up
circonscription
winning.
où l'ingérence étrangère
So
a eu un
that's a
impact.
second riding where foreign interference had a direct impact. The commissioner said that there would be a classified supplement in her report. Will you take the opportunity to read that? Because I think you have that security clearance. And will your leader also do that? Answer?
Security clearance.
I do not have that
I have
security
access to
clearance.
the public report. I've not been cleared at this commission to review top secret or secret information. That said, I think the public report that has been released contains all the information that we need to know to come to conclusions about this government. You know, I mentioned earlier that it's in stark contrast to what the government has told us. The government has consistently also told us that the system worked in the last two elections. Justice Hogue concluded that interference took place in the last two elections, and she was quite critical of the panel and the protocol governing the panel and how it conducted itself during the election. She was also critical of the site panel and how it conducted itself and the rules governing that part of the government of Canada. So I think the public report has plenty of information for us to come to conclusions.
Just to be clear, you
I will
don't
not-
see the need to get the classified report?
That's correct. I
Is
have.
that also the position of your party and his leader?
Yeah, our position is that we have sufficient information from the public-facing information released by the Commission, both in this report and in the evidence that has been released, to come to very strong conclusions.
Last question. Do you know the board said that there are significant gaps in the nomination process and that the Liberals need to relook at their process? And Mr. LeBlanc just said he's got confident in that party's nomination process. Do you have any response to that? And are you confident in the Conservative nomination process?
I'm confident that the Conservatives have a very tight party membership process. We require members of the party to be either Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canada, two very clearly defined matters in law. We also require people to purchase a membership, which through either a credit card or a personal check, that it has to be directly tied to that individual, which makes it much more difficult for people to fraudulently bypass the system. I think the Liberal Party needs to tighten up its rules. I think it's clear through this first report that there are major problems with the way in which Liberals have structured their party and their nomination rules. In fact, Commissioner Hogue indicated in her report that she will have more to say on this in the second phase of her inquiry. And it's clear in her conclusions in this first report that the intelligence that Beijing interfered coercively and corruptly in assisting Mr. Dong in winning his nomination were well-founded, and that this is significant because it could have impacted the individual who was elected to Parliament. Yes, Madam Oak did use the word suspicion in lieu of intelligence, but I think we can safely say that that suspicion derived from the intelligence provided to the Prime Minister, who did not take action in the lead up to that general election. Thank you.